What is the most used man-made material on Earth? You guessed right, it's concrete. Look around, it's everywhere. Sidewalks, driveways, foundations, floor you stand on, and even entire buildings are made out of concrete. So why don't we discuss it more? In each episode of Concrete Logic, we'll explore one concrete-related topic with the help from industry professionals that are shaping the future of the trade. We'll talk with suppliers, contractors, architects, engineers, specialists, and even some proponents of competing materials about their views of concrete and their vision of its future. And welcome to another episode of the Concrete Logic Podcast. Today I have mgrace with Concrete Support Systems. Mark, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Sure, Seth. Good morning. Thanks for having me. Appreciate the reach out. Concrete Support Systems is a nationwide supplier of concrete shoring. We supply that equipment to concrete contractors, subcontractors, general contractors, a couple of distributors across the United States. We have locations in the Northeast, South Central, Southwest U.S. We have been around in this capacity for the past 11 years. I've been in this business since 1996, which I think would put it at about 26 years. This is all I've ever done. It's all I ever want to do. I'm charged up every morning. I wake up that I get to do this, right? And why is that? Because it's an opportunity to leave a lasting impression of structures as you go around the country that you were involved intimately with. Helping to build those, right? And that's a good feeling. So that's it.
Yeah. I think you ask a lot of concrete folks in the industry, and that's why they like dealing with concrete, because it lasts for a long time. You can drive by things that you built 20, 25 years ago. It's still standing there. So yeah, I totally get the legacy thing. So Mark, today we're going to talk about concrete forming systems. And I guess I asked you before we got started if we could start with the basics. If we could try to explain or describe what concrete formwork is, how would you explain it, Mark?
Yeah, so here's how I would explain it. Concrete, when it comes out of a truck, is in kind of a placid state. It's mushy. It's malleable, right? And it needs to be held in place temporarily until it grips around what is reinforcing that runs through concrete, right? And formwork would be that mold, if you will, that encompasses the concrete while it's placid. Shoring would be the temporary support that supports that formwork, right? That holds concrete up in an elevated position or an inclined position until it is cured enough, which is the chemical process of cooking off and hardening to this reinforcing. And so it's temporary because it does get removed after it's gains sufficient strength to support itself.
Yeah, and then go ahead. I'm sorry.
Is that basic enough, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and so once concrete is cured and it can self-support itself, then you remove this formwork, and that's what you see as the finished product. So if one was to drive by like a job site, you might see what looks like to be scaffolding or some kind of metal structure underneath the a floor or that sort of thing. And I'd suppose some people would may confuse scaffolding with concrete formwork with scaffolding on some job sites, because some of the forming systems do kind of look like scaffolding that normal, I guess I say normal people outside the concrete industry probably know what that looks like. Yeah.
90% of the civilians say, "Oh yeah, you're in the scaffolding business." Yeah, sure, right? Because
sure.
Like, if we're going to enter into a 3-hour, discussion, so you can understand what I do for a living, probably.
Right. Yeah. So, and then I asked you if we could go through some of the formwork systems. If we could start with what you typically see come out. There's some really cool stuff that we could probably get into. I like I think the climbing systems and things like that for cores, elevator shafts and stairs. That's pretty cool stuff. But if you could kind of walk us through some basic systems that we use typically, and then I'll ask some dumb questions as we go along.
Sure. So I think if you break that down into kind of two classes, which would be vertical wall formwork and horizontal formwork, right? And both of them kind of group into similar groups, if you will. So you have for vertical wall, you have handset panels, right? And those handset panels could be wedge bolted together or clamped together or actually bolted together, right? And they're meant to be manhandled, moved by a single man from location to location. Then you have what people would refer to generally as gang formwork or crane shifted formwork. That's designed to be put together in multiple large elements, either bolted or clamped together in large segments and moved vis-a-vis a crane or an all-terrain vehicle, depending on the weight of the equipment. And then you would have, like for vertical wall formwork, the next step would be jumping into call it jump form, right? A formwork system that's designed to build a concrete core in a building, which acts as the backbone of a building. Those systems start at a crane shifted system, which sit on supports, and then the wall formwork sits on top of it, and some of it has a platform that you can tilt the form back to access the wall, or you can roll the form back to access the wall. And those are shifted from location to location as you move up through the building. And then you get into climbing systems and independent of the crane, right? And a hydraulic climbing system would have a series of hydraulic cylinders that support themselves off of a shoe that's bolted to a wall, and they push up against a steel gantry system of various configurations. And that gantry system carries the wall formwork as it's hung from the steel elements which make up that gantry, which allows you to shift your entire system independent of the crane, right? Beyond that, you get into really special niche formwork systems for pier caps for bridges that are self-spanning steel form, if you will, or tunnel form that is used in underground construction that would be highly customized element and in its own right, super complicated, right? I think for formwork, that kind of sums it up on the vertical aspect. On the horizontal aspect, you would have very much this similar groups, right? Which is handset shoring, whether it's a frame and brace, right? A steel frame with a cross brace and a stringer and a joist, or a grid system, which would consist of a post shore, a main girder, and a secondary girder that you put plywood on top of. Moving into maybe a truss application where we're flying large table elements from floor to floor to floor, as opposed to setting up individual components, onto column hung, where if the building design is of a certain nature, you can mount brackets on the column and fly column hung systems floor to floor. In a lot of instances, you have these high bay areas in buildings or in water, wastewater treatment plants, or in heavy highway work where you have to have a very high reach for your shoring system and a high load. And so I refer to that always as a high load, high reach system in a general term. And then special applications, like, for instance, egress to enter and exit a building while construction of concrete's going on above, right? Where you don't have to put temporary supports in, it's self-spanning. There's a lot of different ways to build a horizontal concrete deck. And I think there's a lot of different suppliers that can do it, right? But I think those two buckets of vertical and horizontal can be broken into sub buckets, if you will, that they were just described.
Right. So when you are asked to look at a project and decide what forming systems are good for that particular project, could you walk us through what you look at, and do you consider who the client is as well?
Yeah, so I think, we have a nationwide reach, right? And so I think the first thing that you do, you have, in terms of a shoring system, you have to go and get into the mentality of the geography, right? What are the rules and regulations in Manhattan versus Philadelphia versus South Florida versus Central Texas versus the West Coast, right? So if I go to Manhattan, I know it's all got to be hand shifted. I've got to cycle the product by hand. I cannot use a crane to fly out over the street with a large table and fly it back up to the next level. So I first look at, where are we in the country? What are the geographical or regional preferences and rules / regulations, right? So that's step one. And then step two, I would look at, how large is the structure? What are we really trying to accomplish, right? Is a structure, a 40-story building? Or is it a 3-story with a podium? It will change potentially the way I look at the structure, right? So once I get through the regional step, it's going to be the size of the footprint of the building and the height of the building. And then I'm going to look at who's the contractor, right? Is it a concrete subcontractor who does shoring, placing, and finishing? Or is it a concrete formwork contractor who does erection and dismantle, right? Because those guys are going to look at that job completely different, right? So an erection and dismantle guy on, say, a 1,000,000 square foot building, and let's just say it's 4 levels, he's likely going to take 120, 140,000 square foot of equipment. Whereas the concrete contractor might only take 60 to 80,000 square feet, right? And it's just by the nature of how they do business and how they get paid, right? And what they can control and what they cannot control, right? And so you have, those are kind of like that. You're really now getting into the nitty gritty of it, right? And then what do they want to accomplish? And what's that superintendent or that work crew comfortable with, right? So they want a perimeter table that they can shift up to have kind of a physical barrier before they start studying the interior elements. Do they prefer to fly tables, right? Do they see value in erecting large tables that are 28 foot by 60 foot long and flying floor to floor? It really, you have to get really intimate with those folks, right, in the field, right? And then understand what their wants, needs, and desires are. They might not be the guy writing the check. They may not be the guy making the ultimate decision, right? but you definitely don't want to force a square peg into a round hole there, right? Because that guy's going to make money for you or not, right? And he's going to be a repeat customer or not based on your ability to understand what that guy wants down the food chain.
Right. Yeah. No. The geographical point. I overlooked that. That is pretty crucial on the regulations. I didn't know that about New York. And probably I don't know any about the New York regulations because I have no desire to build up there. I see pictures of what those guys are doing up there. That's crazy. And also knowing what I guess too, what talent is in that area, right? So you're considering that as well. You mentioned that, so that makes total sense. Is there other other than the project documents, the architectural, the structural drawings, is there other documents that you like to have your hands on when you're looking at a job?
Yeah. So, right. Look, here's what we look at. I want to see the structural drawings. Mm-hmm. I want to see the architectural drawings. I want to see your schedule. Right. I want to understand your schedule intimately. And I want to see capacity of crane radius. For starters, baseline. That's what I need to be able to understand the job and develop what I would consider how it would potentially be built. I'm not saying should, right? Because that's not my choice, right? That's up to the smart guys in the field. But ultimately, those are the kind of the four things we would want to see on the front side.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of your ideal project. Because sometimes, we're in such a hurry that you're just like, all right, Mark, here's the next job. Hurry up, get us a quote, get us an estimate on this. And there's no communication or anything. We just want the quote. And then we get the quote. Then we scramble back to you and say, what are you doing? Yeah. What are you looking at? So I was just trying to think. So I know ideally you probably want to see like pour breaks and things like that the contractor's sharing with you, and that'll dictate. I'm sure some folks say, hey, this is the square footage I want, and others don't know how much square footage of formwork they want or need, and you got to figure that out for them based on their pour sequence and things like that. So as far as so let's just kind of walk through a job. So we decide how much formwork we need and are going to order, and the job starts and formwork starts showing up. What are some best practices to, I guess, avoid the issues that you see that happen on a job site? Like, for instance, missing equipment, missing parts, things of that nature. As the job is going along, what's some best practices that we can do to avoid things like that?
Yeah. So if I had advice and someone would listen, right? Here's what I would say. One, long before we're at the job, your superintendent and foreman should be intimate with the drawings, the erection drawings that we're going to supply to show how equipment gets installed, right? At that point, they can make decisions, nuanced decisions of, I'd rather have this than that, right? Or, no, that's not right. There's a beam over here. It changed last week. You're right. So revisions that happen from the time you contract and start doing drawings from a erection perspective to actually shipping equipment, we those guys need to be intimately familiar with it, right? And so best practice would be, one, they're engaged. Two, your shoring and formwork suppliers asking you to sign off on this stuff, right? So that there's a record of it, right? Because I can remember a million times when people are like, well, I didn't say that, right? Like, well, no, that actually happened. And by the way, that goes both ways, right? It's not painting the contractor into a corner. It's putting us both on an even playing field, right? So that would be one. Two, get all of those drawings done before you start. Don't start and you're doing a 50-story building and you don't know what's going to happen on level 46 or the amenity deck or the ring beam up on top. You better darn well know what's going to happen so that you can optimize what, truckloads in and truckloads out, right? And so get all of that done ahead of time. Then when you ship equipment, make sure that they're releasing the areas that they want, and they're sending mixed trucks. So don't just send 4 truckloads of post shores. Great job, guys. We got 4 trucks. What are we going to do with this, right? We can't put anything together, right? So, Hertz doesn't deliver a car without the tires, right? Or gas in the tank, right? So you got to kind of make sure that you do it that way. And then I would say, as you receive equipment, the number one thing a contractor can do is count that equipment. I know it sucks, right? I know no one wants to do that, right? But on the best jobs, in terms of closeout, that guy counted the equipment, right? We're going to count it. It's going to be photographed. It's going to be documented. It's going to be put in a virtual folder. You better count it because we're not always right. Okay, I'll say that again. The supplier isn't always right, okay? But we have a lot better conditions than you do on your job, right? And so, it's a lot easier for us to hit that target more often than it would be for you. And so count it as it comes in. As you work the job, right, make sure that you're asking the guys to actively pick up the workspace. Right. I can't say enough about broom sweeping positions as you move through a building or a structure, right? Whether it's a wastewater treatment plant or whether it's a bridge or whether it's a high rise, clean up your workspace, right? It's going to make it more safe. It's going to make it easier to do your job and easier to inventory everything that you have, whether it's power tools or concrete shoring, right? Okay. Then at the end of the job, maximize your truckloads as you ship out to reduce your freight costs, right? And make sure you count everything. The same list you did on the way in, build yourself a spreadsheet or ask your supplier, send me a spreadsheet that shows everything I got on the dates I got it. And then as you load trucks out, by date, by bill of lading, list everything you're shipping, right? I can tell you that in my experience, 25% of people do that. The other 75% leave it up to the supplier, right? And by the way, right, it's going to come into the yard and it's going to be quarantined and it's going to be tagged and it's going to be counted and photographed, right? But people have bad days, right? And people do make mistakes. There's a human element to all of this, right? So I would encourage that contractor to count everything on the way out, right? And that's going to limit your exposure. And it's actually going to give you kind of that leg to really push off of. Never mind stand on, but you're going to be able to push off of that leg and say, nope, it happened right here. You guys missed this truck, right? So those would be my limited pearls of wisdom as it relates to controlling financial risk related to inventory on the job.
Yeah. Yeah, no one likes counting that stuff when it comes in or goes out. But I know you all, as the formwork companies, try to make it easier on us concrete contractors as far as showing us diagrams of how to stack things on the what do you call the pallets?
Shipping pallet basket. I mean, every company's going to have a different name for it.
Yeah. To show us how to stack it so it's stacked the same way as it came in, and it's a little bit easier to count. And then it actually fills it up to a point where you know how many of that particular part is on that pallet. and then providing those baskets to put the small parts in. Have you seen anyone on like a job site that was very meticulous? I guess that would be the best word to describe it. Have just pulling from I shared with you, I worked in the warehouse way back when, but like having a pallet scale for the small parts and just weighing it to confirm what was either received or what is shipped out is weighed for the small parts versus counting each individual part. Because I've just, walking job sites in the past, you see that poor guy he's in charge of all the small parts that he's picking up off the ground throughout the job site, and he's counting, he's just throwing them in the basket one at a time. Have you seen that? And is that something y'all use?
In a warehouse, yes, we'll use a scale to weigh out the small parts, right? But then we put them into buckets, okay? And so they go into 5-gallon buckets. And so you take a widget A, okay, let's call it widget A. I don't know what it weighs, but in the bucket, only 100 of widget A will fit. Done. Fill the bucket up. I don't care how you put them in there. It's going to be off by 1 or 2. That doesn't matter. If you're on the job, we got 100. Done. Half of a bucket of widget B is a full bucket, right? Boom. That's how we set it up. And then you can only get so many buckets into a basket, right? And so, and the baskets are all the same size, right? As are the shipping pallets, right? So in each basket has a total weight on it that it can carry, right? So you can't fill up more than the bucket space will allow. Same thing with the shipping bins, if you will, the open pallets made out of steel. So many can go in. If you put this many into a rack, this is what it weighs, so that you can develop a bill of lading. I know that your thing is more of, hey, if I put 1 on the scale and then I throw X on, it'll get to this weight. I don't even have to count, right? That's not I've never seen that in the field, right? Because remember, right, we get a 25% hit ratio on people counting stuff out, right? So imagine, right? But I'll share this with you. We years ago, we did a job in the Bronx called Croton Water Treatment Plant. It was a joint venture between 2 contractors. And they had a guy, I can't remember his real name, but his nickname was Meatball. Okay. And Meatball's job literally was to count everything that came into the job and came out. Our contract on the rental side was like $5.5 million.
Wow.
And there were 5 or 6 suppliers that had the same kind of contract. Okay. Which means it was like a $40 million, $30 to $40 million formwork and shoring package rental, which is massive, right?
Yeah, substantial.
Your ideal job. Give me another one of those. That'd be great, right? And at the end of that job, it was a $5.5 million revenue stream for us. This is a $50,000 shortage. Shortage damage bill, $50,000. Right. And so think about that. Right. And in terms of a percentage, right, it's nothing. Right. And so typically, if you're below 3%, you're doing a really good job. Right. Some people average somewhere between 10 and 12%, some companies. Right. So if it was 10%, it would be $550,000. Right. Well, Meatball wasn't getting paid $550,000. I can assure you that, right? So that guy paid for himself alone with our contract, right? And he had that spreadsheet, which was everything in, everything out, photographed, full-time job. All you do is count stuff. Terrible job, right? Like I would have quit in probably the first day, but it was worth every penny to get that guy to do it.
Yeah, he paid for his salary and then some.
Oh yeah.
So was Meatball's job just on counting on the way out, or did he manage the inventory the entire project?
Yeah, he owned it. He owned it right in and out.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know if it was just specific to formwork and shoring. I doubt it. I'm pretty sure that anything that came into the job and anything that came out, he counted.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. Having it's almost like having an on-site warehouse manager, like an inventory manager that's responsible for knowing where everything is on the job site. Because I can imagine how much time we waste looking for things, or everybody's walking around and looking for something particular and can't find it, and a lot of hours wasted doing something like that. So that having an inventory manager for the entire length of the project, that sounds like a fantastic idea, and one that somebody should steal.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many times we get a phone call and people say, "Hey, we're out of this. We're out of widget A or widget B or widget C," and we're like, "I think you got them." And you go to the job and you walk, and it's on floor 5, but they're on floor 18. And so, right, they're taking that elevator all the way up to maybe 15 and climbing the ladder to get to the active deck, right? So they don't know it's on floor 5, right? And so we'll go to the job before we ship, because we don't want to, 1, cost the customer freight, 2, deliver more equipment than's needed, right? And then 3, argue about it after the fact, because typically the guy that's saying he doesn't have it isn't authorized to order it, right? And so we'll go to the job and walk and be like, all right, between floors 2, 3, 4, 6, and 7, you get about 2 truckloads of equipment, and there's 400 widget A's. Let's go get them. Oh, okay. Thanks for doing that, right? Right. Part of the service of a supplier should be that, right? Some will just ship it, and we're like, no, we're not doing that. We're going to go look.
Yeah. So we talked about what we do before a job, during the job, and after a job, as far as handling formwork in an ideal situation. And but as far as I guess the future of concrete formwork, is there anything that's out there or folks are discussing, or maybe it's already available to us and we don't realize it, as far as advancements in concrete formwork?
I think to answer that question, I'd say two different things, and I'll speak to the first one first, which is safety, right? This what we all do is very dangerous, right? It's dangerous work. People get hurt. When it goes bad, it goes terribly bad, right? And so over the past kind of 8 years, we've seen an influx of safety screens that cover 3.5 floors of a building, that have a diaper on the bottom to catch anything that's falling, that insulates the building from a mental perspective for the worker, right? So that they can't fall off the leading edge of a structure. That's a big deal. It started in New York, and it started on the West Coast, and it's being driven by actually the developers' insurance companies, right? Which is a great thing. And it's making its way across the country. We saw the first one, one of the first ones. Maybe they've done this maybe 2 or 3 times in the state of Texas. But we're on a structure right now that's, when it tops out, it'll be 948 feet tall in Austin. Wow. It's the tallest building in Austin. And they opted to put a screen on the outside of the building, right? And so that's going to happen a lot more and a lot more, right? And so, check the box. That's a good thing for everybody. In terms of other advancements, I would call them like nuance improvements, right? So typically for years in the handset shoring market, there was a 6x6 grid system that everyone used, right? And it was kind of like Kleenex, okay? Maybe 8 different suppliers had it, and everybody would call it Kleenex, right? I'm not going to use the name, but let's just say it was a Kleenex 6x6 grid system. Everyone has moved towards an 8x8 grid. And what's happened in the design community is we've seen a lot of podium decks, right? So a couple of stories and then a really thick slab to support a wood structure above, right? And those podium decks typically range between 18 and 24 inches, right? And this system that's a 8x8, right, or a 6x6 would require a center support between supports in order to carry that load. So if you have a main beam that the supports are spaced at 6 foot on center, you'd have to come back and put an additional post in the center of the main beam. And then below in your reshore decks, add a post as well to carry that load down. What we saw in the beginning of 2021 was a system called Supergrid that came out, and it had 8x8 spacing, and that 8x8 spacing would take up to a 10-inch deck with a standard steel prop. But if you inserted a higher strength prop, you could get up to an 18-inch deck. So 18-inch deck with an 8x8 system, which covered the bulk of podium decks. Then the same system as Supergrid 88, 8x8 spacing, Supergrid 86, 8x6 spacing, 6x8, 6 foot main beam, 8 foot secondary beam with an aluminum prop allowed you to go up to 24 inches, right? And so, that's us, right? In terms of what has anybody else done, I'm sure they're out there, Seth. I'm a run the ball guy versus a tackle blocked guy. So I haven't really spent a lot of time figuring that out. But I think the biggest takeaway would be that safety aspect of the screens around buildings, right? Which, it's just nothing that we do. We're not in that business, but I can tell you as someone who's scared of heights, when you get off that elevator and you're standing 900 feet above the floor of the street, it feels pretty darn good to have a screen in front of you that you're not going to fall off.
Yeah. And it takes the place of the required fall protection at the leading edge as well. Do you know that?
Yeah, it's interesting. It takes the place of that fall protection at the leading edge if you're on a deck that's been cast. Mm-hmm. Okay. But even if the screen is above the working deck where you're installing plywood, for example, you're still going to have an overhead line with a safety and a tie off, because you can fall whatever the distance is above the actual concrete deck, right? So if it's 8 feet, 10 feet, 12 feet, 14 foot, those guys are still going to be harnessed up and have an arrest system on their back.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah. I've seen those in action. But yeah, I think anything that, for the follow trades down below, after the concrete's been put in place, that's probably more productive for them, since they don't have to worry about wearing fall protection on the leading edge. And then, like you said, it makes people feel good. It's like the building skin is there. But I think this is a good spot to end the conversation today, Mark. If folks want to reach out to you and learn more about you and concrete support systems, what's the best way?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different ways. They can go on our website, www.concretesupportusa.com. They can look me up on LinkedIn, Mark Grace, Concrete Support Systems. They'll be able to follow me on LinkedIn and see all the posts, and which basically highlights first and foremost our most prized element, which is our people, right? We talk a lot about our people on that platform, and then we showcase a lot of jobs. I'd say those are the best ways to reach out, right? Without dropping a cell phone number.
Then you might get some weird phone calls.
You never know.
No, I appreciate you coming on the podcast today, Mark. It was great. You spending time and walking us through formwork systems, and hopefully some folks pull a thing or two from it. And be sure to reach out to Mark. If you got more questions, I'll post his contact information on the show notes as always. Mark, thanks again, and we'll catch you all on the next episode of Concrete Logic.
Thanks, Seth.
Thank you for joining us for another Concrete Logic podcast episode. If you got some value out of this or you enjoyed it, please share it with others. And if you could take a moment and give us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast listening app, I would appreciate it. We will catch you on the next episode. And now Mike Dunton's going to take us out.
That alarm always sings couple hours before the sun comes up. Open up the side, put some diesel in the lights and wait till the trucks roll up. Yeah, this ain't how most folks live their lives, dripping in sweat, working overtime. But while they're tying their ties for their 9 to 5s, we're out here changing these skies.